You think you know yourself. You think you know the people around you. But what happens when the world you rely on, your job, your home, your comfort, your certainty, collapses overnight? When the food is gone, when the rules dissolve, when the masks people wear are ripped away, what remains? This is the question you almost never ask, because it's terrifying. But here's the truth. A crisis doesn't invent human nature. It unmasks it. And the person you believe yourself to be may not be the one who emerges when survival is at stake. In this video, you won't hear the comforting lies of staying positive or keeping calm. You'll uncover the brutal psychology that surfaces when the thin veil of civilization tears apart. You'll see why betrayal, violence, courage, and even acts of unexpected nobility erupt from the same human mind. And if you skip this, you'll keep living with a false image of yourself, an illusion that will shatter the moment life tests you. Because in the end, you don't discover who you truly are in comfort. You discover it in crisis. The thin veil of civilization. Look around you. The hum of electricity, the glow of screens, the rhythm of traffic, the silent choreography of people lining up, paying bills, obeying rules. You take this for granted, as if it were nature itself. But this is not nature, it is scaffolding. Civilization is not the earth beneath your feet. It is wallpaper stretched over stone, thin, decorative, easy to tear. You believe civilization makes you human, but what if it only restrains what you already are? Think of it as a mask you've worn for so long that you've forgotten it isn't your face. The mask smiles, shakes hands, says, "Please," and "Thank you." But beneath it, something waits. Something older than law, older than cities, older than language. Sigmund Freud called it the id, the primitive, instinct-driven engine of your mind. The part that craves food, sex, dominance, survival, without apology. You cover it with the superego, morality, conscience, social order, and between them, balancing on a wire, stands your ego, the negotiator trying to live in both worlds. But what happens when the rope snaps? When hunger, fear, or chaos overwhelms your balance? The mask of morality slips and the id bares its teeth. Thomas Hobbes saw it centuries earlier. He described the state of nature as a war of all against all, where life was solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. According to him, only the heavy hand of authority, the Leviathan, keeps people from tearing each other apart. Hobbes's warning is simple. Civilization is not a garden. It is a fence built around the jungle. Break the fence, and the jungle floods back in. But Carl Jung offered a darker image still. He spoke of the shadow, the hidden reservoir of impulses you deny, repress, and pretend are not yours. Your aggression, your envy, your hunger for control. You think you've buried them, but you've only pressed them into the basement of your psyche. Crisis is the earthquake that cracks the floor, and then the shadow crawls out, uninvited, undeniable. Picture this. You walk into a grocery store. Shelves empty, people shouting, no deliveries coming. The thin lines of politeness collapse. The stranger who yesterday smiled at you in the parking lot is now grabbing the last can from your hands. The cashier who once greeted you kindly now hides supplies under the counter for their own family. In the silence left by broken systems, the primal self begins to howl. Civilization tells you theft is wrong, but what if your child is starving? Civilization says violence is criminal, but what if someone else reaches for the last scrap of food? Do you still cling to morality, or do you act? The line between virtue and survival is thinner than you imagine. That line is civilization itself. And yet don't mistake fragility for weakness. Civilization has power precisely because it hides this truth so well. You believe in it because you must. Every law, every custom, every ritual, from standing in queues to signing contracts, is a spell designed to keep the shadow chained. We are, all of us, spellbound by the idea that tomorrow will be orderly, that strangers will remain civil, that the jungle has been tamed. But here's the paradox. The jungle never left. It presses against the walls of every city and against the walls of your mind. You feel it when anger surges, when jealousy bites, when fear freezes you. You call it losing control, but it is not loss, it is revelation. You are glimpsing the animal beneath the suit, the hunger beneath the handshake. Civilization is not a fortress, it is a performance. Each day you play your role, employee, parent, citizen, friend, and others play theirs. Together the performance convinces you it is real. But when crisis strikes, the stage collapses. Costumes fall, scripts burn, and the actors forget their lines. What remains is not the show, but the raw creature behind it. So ask yourself, who are you when the stage disappears? Do you cling to the remnants of the script whispering, "I am civilized," as you starve? Or do you surrender to the hidden voice within, the one that has been waiting centuries for the lights to go out? Here lies the tension. Civilization protects you, but it also deceives you. It tells you that your higher self is permanent, when in fact it is conditional. That you are moral by nature, when in truth, morality is fragile scaffolding erected on unstable ground. And this is why crisis terrifies you. Not only because of hunger or loss, but because of exposure. Because when the veil tears, the face underneath is no longer hidden, and you must confront the possibility that the person you thought you were, the kind, polite, rational self, is only a costume stitched together by comfort. Crisis does not invent your darkness. It simply removes the curtain, and once you've seen what waits beneath, you can never unsee it. Fight, flight, freeze, the survival brain. When the veil of civilization tears, your mind does not politely ask, "What is the moral thing to do?" It does something older, sharper, faster. It plunges you into survival mode. And in survival mode, you do not think, you react. This reaction has three faces: fight, flight, and freeze. They are not choices you calmly consider. They are ancient scripts written into your nervous system long before you were born. Evolution etched them into you like scars carried across millennia. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff. The ground shakes, rocks splinter and tumble. In that instant, before you can form a single thought, your body decides: leap back, run forward, or lock in place. That decision does not come from reason. It comes from the survival brain, the primal circuitry buried deep in your amygdala and nervous system. Fight. When survival demands confrontation, your body floods with adrenaline. Your muscles tighten, your vision narrows, your heart hammers. Suddenly you are not the calm, rational self who calculates pros and cons. You are an animal bristling for dominance. In crisis, fight is not about fairness. It is about eliminating threat. The polite neighbor becomes the predator. The friend becomes the competitor. You may discover strength you never knew existed, or violence you swore you were incapable of. Both come from the same place, the will to endure, flight. Sometimes survival means escape. The urge to flee is not cowardice, it is strategy, coded into your DNA. Animals bolt from predators not because they lack courage, but because they understand instinctively that the fastest path to survival is distance. In crisis, you may abandon possessions, reputations, even relationships, if your brain calculates, without words, that escape gives you the highest chance of living. You can call this betrayal or you can call it adaptation, but in the survival brain, there is no moral language, only calculation in lightning flashes of instinct. Freeze. The most misunderstood response. When the rabbit goes still under the hawk's shadow, it is not weakness, it is camouflage. When you stand paralyzed, unable to speak or move, your body is performing its oldest ritual, invisibility. Freezing keeps you unnoticed, unthreatening, forgotten. In some crises, silence is survival. Your mind shuts down, your voice vanishes, and you become a ghost in your own body. You think it is failure, but the survival brain knows stillness can save you when running or fighting would only end in death. Now here is the unsettling truth. You do not control which response emerges. You may believe you are brave, but in crisis, you may freeze. You may believe you are gentle, but in crisis, you may fight with savage force. You may believe you are loyal, but in crisis, you may flee without looking back. What you discover is not what you hope to be, but what you are wired to be. This wiring comes from a time when your ancestors faced predators, storms, and starvation daily. Those who fought, fled, or froze at the right moment lived. Those who hesitated did not. Their genes ended with them. Yours did not. Which means inside you is the legacy of countless survival decisions. Decisions not made with ethics or ideals, but with raw instinct. You think your intelligence makes you special. You think your reason places you above the animal kingdom. But in the moment of crisis, reason takes a back seat. Instinct seizes the wheel. This is why philosophers like Nietzsche spoke of humans as the most dangerous animal. Because you are not just a thinker, you are a survivor wrapped in thought. And yet, this survival brain does not always reveal the worst in you. Sometimes it produces unimaginable courage, a mother lifting rubble to save her child, a stranger shielding another from harm. These are not choices in the rational sense. They are eruptions of instinct, driven by the same survival circuitry that fuels aggression and flight. In crisis, your noblest and darkest moments spring from the same soil. This is why crisis feels so alien, so destabilizing. Because it reveals a truth you would rather ignore. Beneath your stories of kindness, morality, and identity lies a creature of reflex. And that creature is not gone. It is you. So when the moment comes, when the system cracks, when the ground falls away, you will not become who you aspire to be. You will become who you already are, coded in your nerves, hidden beneath your mask. The only question is, will you fight, flee, or freeze? Morality under pressure. You like to believe that morality is permanent, that you know right from wrong, and that these lines never blur. You imagine yourself as loyal, honest, compassionate, because in your daily life it costs little to be so. You can afford kindness when the shelves are full, when the law is enforced, when tomorrow is guaranteed. But morality is not forged in comfort. It is tested in scarcity. And in scarcity, morality bends. Picture yourself in crisis. You are hungry, your family weaker by the hour. There is one piece of bread left, and another hand reaches for it. Do you let it go because stealing is wrong? Or does your hand tighten, pulling it back, because your child's survival outweighs any abstract principle? In that moment, morality is no longer philosophy. It is negotiation with desperation. Psychologists have long probed this fragile boundary. The Milgram experiments showed how ordinary people, under the pressure of authority, could inflict harm they never thought themselves capable of. The Stanford prison experiment revealed how quickly roles can corrode empathy, how guards became cruel and prisoners submissive in mere days. Strip away rules, apply pressure, and morality is no longer a shield. It becomes clay, shaped by circumstance. And here's the paradox. Crisis does not make everyone selfish. Sometimes it awakens radical generosity. You've seen glimpses of this. The stranger who shares their last resource, the friend who risks themselves for others. But even here, morality is being rewritten. Self-sacrifice is not always rational. It is instinct dressed in virtue, an ancient urge to protect kin, tribe, or reputation, even at the cost of your life. In survival, morality fractures into three competing instincts: self-preservation, protect yourself at all costs. Betrayal, theft, even violence can suddenly feel justified if they mean you endure another day. Tribal loyalty. Extend morality only to your group, your family, your allies. Outsiders become expendable. The circle of compassion shrinks, hardens, excludes. Transcendence. A rare few expand morality instead of shrinking it. They risk themselves not because it's logical, but because some part of them finds meaning in sacrifice. Which instinct will rule you? You cannot know until you are pressed against the wall. That's the haunting truth. Civilization makes morality look like a steady compass. Crisis reveals it for what it is, a fragile truce between hunger, fear, and hope. You may think you would never betray a friend, never harm another, never choose yourself over others. But morality is not a declaration, it is a cost you pay. And when the cost rises, many discover that their virtue was only as strong as their comfort. So ask yourself, if tomorrow stripped you bare, if survival demanded compromise, how far would you bend? Would you cling to your principles and risk perishing with them? Or would you let them shatter, telling yourself, I had no choice? This is why crisis is terrifying, not just because of hunger, violence, or chaos, but because it forces you to face the unspoken truth. Your morality is negotiable, and yet, hidden in this darkness lies a paradoxical light. Crisis may strip some to selfishness, but it also forges others into saints. Which are you? The betrayer, the protector, or the transcendent? You cannot predict it. You can only discover it when the world demands payment for your values, and you must decide what you are willing to spend. The shadow side of human nature. When the storm of crisis hits, one of the first truths to emerge is that beneath our polished surface lies a shadow, a darker side of human psychology that most of us deny or repress. Civilization trains us to behave, to cooperate, to conform, but survival strips away those learned behaviors and forces instincts to the front. What you're about to see isn't comfortable, but it is essential if you want to understand what truly drives people when the thin veil of order falls apart. The collapse of morality. Morality works best when life is stable. Rules like don't steal or don't harm others assume there's enough for everyone. But when scarcity enters the picture, morality bends. A starving person may justify theft. A desperate parent may rationalize violence to protect their child. In a crisis, people don't abandon morality. They rewrite it to fit survival. The same person who once condemned stealing may now say, I had no choice. This reveals a sobering fact. Our moral codes are often luxuries sustained by abundance. When that abundance disappears, survival instinct rewrites the rules. The psychology of betrayal. Betrayal in crisis is not rare, it's expected. History and psychology both show that when survival is at stake, trust becomes fragile. Even tight-knit groups can fracture when resources dwindle or fear grows. Psychologists call this the self-preservation paradox. We depend on others to survive, but in the moment of danger, we're also tempted to sacrifice others for our own safety. This explains why friends, neighbors, or even family members may turn against each other under pressure. The same instinct that drives cooperation can, under duress, mutate into betrayal. The emergence of violence. Violence often erupts not because people are evil, but because fear rewires the brain. Neuroscience shows that under extreme stress, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, takes over, overriding rational thought. When adrenaline surges and survival feels threatened, even ordinary individuals can commit extraordinary acts of aggression. This is why crowds in crisis can transform into mobs. Fear spreads like wildfire, amplifying aggression until people act in ways they would never imagine in calmer moments. The shadow side of human nature doesn't just include violence, it includes how easily violence can spread through groups. The mask of civilization. Perhaps the most unsettling truth is that the civilized behavior you see in daily life may be more fragile than you think. Psychologists often describe civilization as a thin mask, a social performance we've all agreed to play. It works as long as conditions remain stable. But when conditions collapse, the mask falls away, and the primal instincts beneath, fear, hunger, aggression, betrayal, come flooding back. This is why so many accounts of crisis sound eerily similar. People shocked at their own behavior, or horrified at how quickly the rules of decency dissolved. It's not that the crisis created monsters, it simply exposed what was always there waiting. The comforting lie versus the harsh truth. The comforting lie is that you know who you are, and that your values are fixed no matter what. The harsh truth is that in crisis, identity is flexible, morality is negotiable, and human nature carries both light and shadow. To ignore this is to live in an illusion. To face it is to begin understanding the real psychology of survival. the light side of human nature. Up to now, we've walked through the shadows, the betrayal, the violence, the collapse of morality. But that isn't the whole story. Crisis doesn't just reveal the worst in people, it can also bring out the very best. When survival is on the line, many discover within themselves qualities they never imagined they had. Courage, resilience, generosity, and even self-sacrifice. If the shadow shows our capacity for destruction, the light shows our capacity for greatness. The spark of courage. Fear is the first reaction in a crisis, but for some, fear becomes the fuel for courage. Courage is not the absence of fear, it's action in spite of it. Psychological studies on first responders and soldiers show that when chaos erupts, many people step forward, not back. Something awakens, a sense of responsibility, a refusal to abandon others, a belief that, if I don't act, no one will. This isn't limited to heroes in uniforms. Ordinary people often perform extraordinary deeds. A parent shielding a child, a stranger guiding others to safety, a neighbor risking their life to help. These moments prove that survival psychology isn't only selfish, it can also be deeply selfless. The bond of solidarity crisis often creates communities where none existed before. When disaster strikes, people instinctively band together. Psychologists call this collective resilience. Strangers who might never have spoken under normal circumstances share food, offer comfort, or defend one another. Why does this happen? Because survival is rarely individual. Evolution wired us to depend on groups. When chaos hits, solidarity isn't just moral, it's practical. Cooperation increases chances of survival, and that shared struggle for survival forges bonds stronger than comfort ever could. Acts of generosity in scarcity. One of the paradoxes of crisis is that even in scarcity, generosity flourishes. You'd expect people to hoard, and yes, some do. But again and again, history shows people sharing the little they have. A starving family dividing bread with neighbors, a wounded survivor urging doctors to treat others first. These moments defy logic, but reveal something profound. Survival isn't only about biology, it's about meaning. Psychologists argue that generosity in crisis often stems from identity. People want to be remembered not as victims or betrayers, but as those who rose above. When survival feels uncertain, meaning becomes more valuable than possession. The rise of leadership crisis also reveals hidden leaders, not necessarily the loudest, strongest, or most authoritative, but those who can stay calm, think clearly, and inspire others when fear dominates. Leadership in crisis isn't about titles, it's about action. And here's the surprising truth. Many who discover this leadership role had no idea it was within them. The crisis awakens it. Leadership under pressure shows the human mind's capacity to adapt, to grow beyond fear, and to find strength precisely in the place of greatest weakness. The light within the dark. The duality of human nature becomes clearest here. The same conditions that produce betrayal can also produce sacrifice. The same fear that triggers violence can also trigger courage. The same scarcity that justifies selfishness can also inspire generosity. Crisis is not a one-way mirror, it's a magnifier. It magnifies whatever is latent within us, for better or worse. This is why some people emerge from crisis ashamed of what they did, while others emerge proud of what they became. It's not that one group had different instincts, it's that each responded differently to the same inner forces. The paradox of human nature. So here's the paradox. Crisis reveals both our shadow and our light. It exposes the worst impulses, violence, betrayal, fear. But it also reveals the noblest instincts, courage, solidarity, generosity. To understand survival psychology is to accept that both exist within you. You are not simply good or bad. You are a spectrum of possibilities, waiting to be drawn out by circumstances. The comforting story says, people are basically good. The cynical story says, people are basically selfish. The truth? People are both. And crisis is the stage on which the truth finally steps into the light. Philosophical and psychological insights. Now you've seen the shadow and the light. You've glimpsed betrayal, violence and fear, but also courage, solidarity, and sacrifice. The question lingers like smoke in the air. What does all this really mean about human nature? To answer, we have to turn to the great thinkers and the deepest corners of psychology. Hobbes, Humanity as the Wolf. 17th century philosopher Thomas Hobbes believed that in a state of nature, without law or order, life would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. To him, civilization was the only fragile dam holding back a flood of chaos. Strip away the rules, and people would revert to raw competition, each against all. Through Hobbes's eyes, crisis is proof that the thin veil of civilization is exactly that, thin. Beneath your polite smile lies the wolf, always waiting. Rousseau. Humanity as the noble being. Jean-Jacques Rousseau looked at the same question and reached the opposite conclusion. To him, humans in their natural state were innocent, compassionate, even noble. It was society with its greed, corruption, and inequality that poisoned us. So if Hobbes saw crisis as revealing savagery, Rousseau would argue it reveals purity. In crisis, stripped of artificial status and wealth, you might rediscover your simplest, most authentic compassion. Freud, Civilization's Thin Ice. Sigmund Freud complicated both views. He saw human nature as driven by primal instincts, desire, aggression, fear, that civilization barely controls. Rules and norms don't eliminate these instincts, they just press them underground. In a crisis, the repression cracks and raw impulses flood out. From Freud's perspective, what you see in crisis isn't transformation, it's revelation. The mask slips, and the unconscious drives you try to hide suddenly control you. Jung, the shadow and the self. Carl Jung pushed this further. He spoke of the shadow, the dark, hidden aspects of the self that you deny or repress. Crisis forces you into confrontation with this shadow. The aggression, the selfishness, the panic, they aren't strangers. They're parts of you, long buried, but never gone. But Jung also believed in balance. Integrating the shadow, acknowledging both your dark and your light, was the path to wholeness. Crisis is the mirror that shows you both sides. Ignore it, and you remain blind. Face it, and you grow. Nietzsche. Crisis as a forge. Then there's Friedrich Nietzsche. He would tell you that crisis is not tragedy, but opportunity. Pain, fear, and struggle are the crucibles that forge greatness. Nietzsche's concept of amor fati, the love of fate, teaches that what breaks you can also build you if you have the strength to embrace it. To Nietzsche, crisis is not the mask falling away. It's the fire that either consumes you or tempers you into steel. The question isn't whether crisis reveals your nature, it's whether you seize it to become something greater than you were. Modern psychology, beyond philosophy. Philosophy gave us metaphors, psychology gives us mechanisms. Studies in evolutionary psychology reveal that humans are wired for survival in groups, not isolation. This explains why crisis produces both selfish hoarding and acts of solidarity. Both instincts evolve to maximize survival, depending on context. Cognitive psychology shows how stress changes thought. Under pressure, your brain narrows focus, discarding logic for instinct. You don't calmly calculate, you act fast, sometimes blindly. That's why fear spreads like contagion, and why leadership under pressure is so rare. Social psychology adds another layer. Humans are deeply influenced by group behavior. Panic breeds panic. Courage breeds courage. The actions of a few can cascade into collective despair, or collective resilience. The tension that never breaks. So, what do you make of all this? Hobbes says you're a wolf. Rousseau says you're an angel. Freud says you're repressed. Jung says you're divided. Nietzsche says you're untested. Psychology says you're wired to be both selfish and selfless, depending on the moment. The lesson isn't to pick one answer. The lesson is to accept the tension. Crisis doesn't give you a single truth about human nature. It reveals that human nature is contradiction itself. You are both the betrayer and the protector, both the coward and the hero, both the hoarder and the giver. And here's the final sting. You never know which one you are until the mask of comfort falls away. Crisis doesn't just test you, it defines you. Crisis as the ultimate test of identity. Strip away your possessions. Strip away your titles, your routines, your money, your reputation. Imagine all the structures you've built around yourself collapsing in a single night. Who are you then? This is the question crisis forces upon you. Not, what do you own, or what role do you play? But what is left when everything else is gone? Identity without armor. In ordinary life, you wrap yourself in armor, your job, your status, your friends, your comforts. You say, this is who I am. But when crisis comes, that armor shatters. The doctor is no longer a doctor if there are no hospitals. The wealthy are no longer wealthy if there is nothing to buy. The admired are no longer admired if the crowd is too busy surviving to applaud. What remains is the raw self, the self stripped of performance. And that self may shock you. The monster, the saint, the fragile middle in crisis, some become monsters. Their fear turns into violence, their hunger into cruelty. They justify everything with the excuse of survival. Others become saints. Their courage expands, their compassion intensifies, their willingness to suffer for others defines them. And in between lies the fragile middle, those who neither betray nor transcend but simply struggle, caught between shadow and light. Most people fall here, surviving without glory, enduring without collapse. But the dividing line is thin, and crisis can push you from one side to the other in an instant. The mirror of choice. Identity in crisis isn't just revealed, it's shaped. Each decision becomes a mirror. Do you hoard or share? Do you hide or help? Do you betray or protect? With every choice, your identity crystallizes. You are no longer who you say you are what you do. This is why crisis feels so terrifying. It doesn't just threaten your life, it threatens your story. It forces you to face the possibility that the person you believed yourself to be may not exist. The existential test. Philosophers like Kierkegaard and Sartre argued that crisis is the moment of true existence. When illusions fall away, you can no longer hide behind excuses. You must define yourself through action. That is freedom, but it is also unbearable responsibility. Crisis strips you bare and whispers, now, without your mask, without your shield, who are you? And maybe the most haunting part is this. You don't truly know until the moment arrives. You carry within you the potential for both savagery and sacrifice, both cowardice and courage. Crisis doesn't just expose that potential, it demands you choose which one becomes real. By now, you've walked through the corridors of shadow and light. You've seen how crisis strips away masks, how it forces you to confront your instincts, how it pushes you into choices that redefine who you are. But step back, zoom out. Ask the larger question, what does all this reveal about humanity itself? The Hobbesian view, humanity as predator. Hobbes whispers, humans are wolves. Without order, laws and authority, you collapse into chaos. Crisis is not an exception. It's the natural state, the raw truth beneath civilization. To Hobbes, what you call morality is nothing but a contract, and contracts dissolve the moment survival is at stake. If he is right, crisis doesn't distort human nature. It reveals it with terrifying clarity. The Rousseauian view, humanity as innocent Rousseau, whispers the opposite. Humans are noble at the core, corrupted by society. Strip away status and greed, and what remains is compassion, empathy, and simplicity. Crisis, in his eyes, is purification. It burns away the artificial and uncovers the primal innocence buried beneath. If Hobbes sees crisis as degeneration, Rousseau sees it as renewal. The Nietzschean view, humanity as becoming Nietzsche, would laugh at both. He'd tell you there is no fixed human nature, good or bad. Crisis is not about revealing, it's about becoming. It is the forge in which weakness either breaks or transforms into strength. Crisis is the chance to overcome, to create yourself anew, to embody the will to power. Where Hobbes and Rousseau argue over essence, Nietzsche insists, essence does not exist, only potential. The Jungian view, humanity as dual. Carl Jung would add yet another voice. For him, the crisis is the mirror of the self. It reveals both shadow and light. To Jung, you are not purely good or purely evil. You are both. The question is not whether crisis unmasks you as one or the other, but whether you can integrate the two, accept the contradiction, and emerge whole. The modern psychological view. Humanity as adaptive. And psychology. It shrugs at philosophy's absolutes. It says humans are adaptive. You shift between selfishness and generosity depending on context. Fear may push you toward betrayal. Solidarity may pull you toward sacrifice. The human mind is not one fixed nature, but a flexible survival machine, capable of embodying both Hobbes' wolf and Rousseau's angel, sometimes in the same moment. The crossroads. So where does this leave you? At a crossroads with no final map. Hobbes, Rousseau, Nietzsche, Jung, psychology. They all shine light on one part of the puzzle, but none can claim the whole. And maybe that's the most important truth of all. Crisis is not a final answer about human nature. It is the question itself. It forces you to choose between fear and courage, selfishness and generosity, shadow and light. The philosophers hand you mirrors, psychology hands you mechanisms. Crisis hands you the stage. What you do upon it is not predetermined. It is created in the moment by you. So the haunting question remains, when your crisis comes, and it will, what will it reveal? You've walked through the fire. You've seen civilization as a paper wall, instincts roaring beneath, morality bending, shadows rising, light breaking through. You've heard Hobbes whisper of wolves, Rousseau sing of innocence, Nietzsche laugh about becoming, Jung warn of shadows. Psychology reveal the flexible machine of the mind. And now you're left with the most unsettling truth of all. There is no single answer. Crisis does not hand you clarity. It hands you contradiction. It unmasks you, yes, but it also remakes you. It shows you the coward and the hero, the betrayer and the protector, the monster and the saint. Both live inside you, both wait in silence, and only the storm can decide which one emerges. And that's why crisis matters, not just as an external event, but as an inner test. Because one day, your mask will be torn away. One day, the comfort that shields you will vanish. And in that moment, you will stand naked before yourself. Will you find a stranger staring back? Or will you recognize someone you've always secretly hoped you could be? That question is the one you carry with you now. A question with no easy answer, no comforting certainty. A question that lingers like a shadow at the edge of your vision. Because in the end, crisis doesn't just reveal true human nature. It reveals your true nature. And the haunting truth is this: you won't know who you are until the moment arrives.